Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to think about this for a second. Tonight, when the sun goes down, you're gonna walk into a room, flip a switch, and light will instantly flood the space. You won't even think twice about it, right? But what we're gonna explore today is a genuinely profound mystery. Because for roughly 300,000 years before artificial light, every single one of your ancestors spent nearly half their lives in near total darkness. So, what did humans actually do in the dark for all those millennia? Well, the answer changes literally everything we think we know about sleep, storytelling, and our own human biology. Let's dive in.
You really have to look at this stark contrast to grasp how completely disconnected our modern evenings are from our evolutionary past. I mean, for 99.9% of human history, when the sun set, you couldn't even see your own hand in front of your face. There were no light bulbs, and honestly, for most of that time, not even candles. It was just a pitch black sky, the stars, and maybe a small fire. But today, continuous artificial light is our default. We've totally overridden the biological environment our bodies were perfectly adapted to.
Part 1. When the world went dark. The story of our night actually kicks off about 1,000,000 years ago at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. That is where we find the earliest solid evidence of humans controlling fire. Now, before this, we were pretty much just like every other primate out there. Moving around at night meant one thing: you became food. Our eyes are absolutely terrible in the dark compared to predators like leopards, hyenas, and wolves. But fire changed that equation literally overnight. A campfire creates this literal 30-foot boundary between life and death. Inside that 30-foot diameter, you're safe, you live. Predators just won't come near it. But outside that circle, you are prey. In fact, anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherers note that people who wander away from the fire at night are still significantly more likely to be killed. It's wild.
The fire did so much more than just protect us from teeth and claws in the dark. It fundamentally restructured the human day. Before fire, your useful day just ended at sunset. That meant maybe 12 hours of activity in the summer and as few as 8 in the winter. Suddenly, fire gave humans something they never had before: 2 to 4 extra usable hours every single day. And over thousands of generations, those extra hours completely transformed our species.
Now, what's really interesting about this next slide is how we actually figured out what early humans did with all that extra time. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Weisner published an incredibly fascinating study. She spent years living with and recording the conversations of the Juhanzi Bushmen down in the Kalahari Desert. They live a lifestyle that's very close to our original ancient human routine. And she wanted to document one specific thing: the difference between what they talked about during the day and what they talked about at night. Well, as you can see, during the sunlit hours, it was all business. About 80% of all daytime conversation was purely practical. It was entirely focused on the work of survival. You know, things like who's hunting where today, which plants are ready to be gathered. It was all logistics, economic negotiations, and planning. Daytime talk was strictly practical.
But look at this striking visual flip. The absolute second the sun went down, there was a massive shift. Around that nighttime campfire, a whopping 81% of conversations were stories. We're talking tales of distant places, myths about how the world began, and jokes that had the whole camp roaring with laughter. The campfire essentially became humanity's original theater. It was our first classroom, our first church. This right here is exactly where human culture and imagination were born. It's where we literally learned to think beyond the immediate present. Part 2. First and second sleep. So the night wasn't just about stories around a fire. It totally dictated our biology too. Fast forward to 2001, and a historian named Roger Ikert makes this massive discovery. He'd spent 16 years digging through historical records, and he found over 500 references to something called first and second sleep. And these references were everywhere. They spanned centuries. He found them in prayer books from the 1400s, ordinary diaries, court records, even buried in passages of Homer's Odyssey. What he proved was that before the industrial age, we weren't meant to sleep in one continuous 8-hour block. Sleeping in 2 distinct shifts, known as biphasic sleep, was the absolute norm for humanity. Let me walk you through exactly how this ancient night worked. Step 1, people would go to bed pretty much right after sunset and get their first sleep for about 4 hours. Step 2, they would just naturally wake up. This waking period was commonly known as the watch, and they'd stay awake for 1 to 2 hours right in the dead of night. Then, step 3, they'd fall back into their second sleep for another 4 hours until dawn. Again, this wasn't some kind of sleep disorder. This was just how every single human on the planet naturally slept. Which begs the question, what did ordinary people actually do in the pitch black for 2 hours every single night? Well, a little bit of everything. They'd visit neighbors, write, or maybe interpret their dreams while they were still fresh in their minds. Just look at this quote from a 1500s doctor's manual. The best time to study and reflect is during the watch, when the mind is calm and the world is still. It really paints a picture, doesn't it? People utilized this quiet midnight wakefulness simply to lie in the dark and think. Of course, they also used this time for, well, other evening activities. A 16th century French physician actually highly recommended this specific window of time for intimacy. He confidently stated that couples should conceive children during this window because they will do it better. And it makes sense. Having already rested for 4 solid hours, people actually had the energy to socialize, reflect, and spend real quality time together before drifting off into their second sleep. But here's the crazy part. Why did we forget this? Historians had literally been reading these references for centuries, but the modern assumption of an unbroken 8-hour sleep was so deeply ingrained that translators literally mistranslated ancient Greek and medieval Latin. They just couldn't fathom biphasic sleep, so their own modern bias led them to assume that these ancient texts must have somehow meant something else. Okay, let's dive into this. Part 3, the science of the watch. So all of this history is great, but is our modern body actually still wired for this ancient routine? In 1992, a researcher named Thomas Ware over at the National Institute of Mental Health ran an incredible experiment to find out. He took a group of volunteers, completely removed every single source of artificial light from their lives, and subjected them to 14 hours of daily darkness for a full month. He basically replicated the prehistoric evening. And the results? Absolutely stunning. Within just a few weeks, without any prompting whatsoever, every single participant naturally reverted right back to that ancient pattern. 4 hours of sleep, a couple of hours awake, and 4 more hours of sleep.
But it gets better. Ware also measured their hormone levels during that midnight wakeful period. And he found it wasn't just a random gap in sleep. It was a completely distinct biological state. The subjects experienced these massive surges of prolactin. Now, this is the exact same hormone released during deep meditation. The participants described feeling incredibly peaceful and reflective. This ancient watch wasn't insomnia. It was a unique, tranquil state of human consciousness that we have completely lost.
Part 4, how light killed the night. So how do we lose this natural rhythm so incredibly fast? Well, historically, the night was downright terrifying. Take the word curfew, for example. It actually comes from the French phrase couvre-feu, which literally translates to cover fire. Medieval towns would literally ring a bell to signal everyone to put out their fires. The night belonged to the supernatural and to criminals. Being out after dark without a lantern wasn't just suspicious. In some cities, it was literally illegal. Night was deeply feared and strictly meant for sleeping in the dark. But then we rapidly engineered the darkness away. We just erased it. In the 1600s, Paris installed street lamps under Louis XIV to help cut down on crime. Then came cheaper candles, followed by gas lamps in the 1800s, and finally, the ultimate game changer. In 1879, Thomas Edison commercialized the electric light bulb. In just a handful of generations, we completely flooded the night with light, totally overriding 300,000 years of evolutionary programming. And as you might guess, there is a heavy biological cost to all this modern convenience. Today, on average, we're exposed to artificial light for 7 to 8 hours after sunset. The artificial blue light coming from our screens actively suppresses our body's production of melatonin. That's the hormone that regulates your sleep. When that harsh blue light hits your retina at 11 p.m., your brain literally interprets it as the daytime sun. It completely delays your natural sleep cues and just fractures your entire circadian rhythm. But the truly amazing thing is how fast our bodies can actually remember. Researchers have found that if you take people camping for just 1 week in total darkness, no flashlights, no phones, absolutely no artificial light allowed, their bodies basically do a hard reboot. Their melatonin cycles biologically reset by nearly 2 hours. They shift to release exactly at sunset, just like our ancestors. The programming is still completely intact in us. It's just buried under all our screens and light bulbs. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought. Millions of people today suffer from what we call insomnia. They wake up at 2 a.m., they lie in the dark, and they absolutely panic, convinced their body is malfunctioning. But what if it's not a disorder at all? What if waking up at 2 a.m. is simply your body remembering exactly what it was built to do? We traded an entire, beautiful phase of human consciousness for the convenience of a light switch. So thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. And hey, the next time you wake up in the middle of the night, maybe don't stress. Just take a breath and try to enjoy the peacefulness of the watch.